The spiritual vitality of the Reformation subsided thereafter. However, in the late 17th century, a new wave of revivals broke out that reacted against what some perceived as the overly formalistic, lifeless Lutheran orthodoxy. This new movement, known as the Pietist movement, profoundly influenced the Protestant world in the late 17th and early 18th centuries. What you see behind me is the Nicholas Church, the oldest church in Berlin. From 1691 to 1705, Philipp Jakob Spener was pastor here. Spener was one of the key founding fathers of the Pietist movement when he was a pastor in Frankfurt at the time. Spener, in his book Pia Desiderio, was going to call for Christian conversion experiences, calls for acts to charity, to small group Bible studies, and also devotional reading of the Bible, which was path-breaking and was going to establish the Pietist movement, which had a powerful impact not just here in Berlin, but also throughout Germany in the 1670s and thereafter. After Spener was in Berlin, he was able to get an appointment for August Hermann Franke, a protege of his, at this church here in Glaucha, which is a suburb of Halle. This is St. George's Church. About 5 years earlier, Franke, after wrestling with doubt, had experienced a powerful conversion. He described his conversion this way: "Now I experienced the truth of what Luther said in the preface to the Epistle of the Romans. Faith is a divine work in us that transforms us and gives us new birth and slays the old Adam, making us entirely new men." After ministering for over 2 decades in St. George's Church, Franke transferred here to St. Ulrich's Church in central Halle. Franke became very concerned about the poor children who were going around his neighborhood begging for bread. He began giving them religious instruction, but he wanted to offer them more. He began building this orphanage, which within a few years housed, on the average, 100 boys and 30 girls. In addition to the school and orphanage, Franke also established a publishing enterprise, a pharmacy, and a bookstore at his institution. The publishing house printed Bibles and religious literature, including many of Franke's own writings to propagate the Christian message. The first Bible Institute was set up here by Carl Friedrich von Kannstein. This publishing house, the bookstore, and the pharmacy often turned a profit, and these funds were used to finance the orphanage and schools. By the time Franke died in 1727, his institution was massive, serving over 2,900 people per day. With his zeal for missions, Franke sent out the first overseas missionaries for Protestants, including Bartholomäus Ziegenbalg. They also published Bibles in many languages. This is the Moravian Brethren Church in Haran Hood, where in the 1720s a powerful revival broke out under the auspices of Count Nicholas von Zinzendorf. Zinzendorf, at age 10, had gone to study at Franke's institution, so he was powerfully influenced by the earlier Pietist movement. While he was there, he held a Bible study and converted many of his fellow students. At age 19, Zinzendorf took a European tour, and while he was on that tour, he visited an art museum where he saw a painting of Jesus suffering. In that painting, Jesus said, "All this I have done for you. What have you done for me?" Zinzendorf was powerfully influenced by that and decided to devote his life to the service of the Lord. Zinzendorf bought this estate in Bertels Dorf in 1722. Later that same year, he met Christian David, a Moravian who was looking for refuge for Protestants who were being persecuted in Catholic Moravia. He offered them refuge here on his estate, which ultimately was going to lead to the founding of Haran Hood. Now we're at the church in Bertels Dorf near Haran Hood, where the 1727 revival caught on. A participant at one of the meetings claimed that everyone was so affected that their hearts were set on fire with new love and faith towards the Savior, and likewise with burning love toward one another.
They formed a spiritual community which really tried to live by the rules of the New Testament, and Zinzendorf was eager to find people who were sharing his vision of a real commitment to Christ and also to mission and to build up a really Christ-centered spiritual community.
Haran Hood means the watch of the Lord, and here we are at Hutberg, which means watch hill. The Haran Hooders took this very seriously, for after the revival broke out in 1727, they began a 24-hour prayer vigil. At one time they had 77 people participating in this vigil. They would pray for their community and for missions. This prayer vigil went on for over 100 years. The Pietist movement in Germany had a huge impact on the church and society. It promoted spiritual vitality with its emphasis on the need for Christians to have a true conversion experience that would give them a personal, heartfelt relationship with God. It also led to the establishment of charitable organizations and initiated the earliest Protestant overseas missions.